Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this review I want to look at the Halo 4 Series 1 Wave 2 Extended Wave, whatever you want to call it, Cortana figure. This is the Cortana based on Halo 4, and I really like this figure, so I think we should talk about it. So here we go. First things first, she stands on her base a total of just over 6 inches, about 6 1/4 inches tall. Without the base, she stands 5 inches tall. Now you're going to have a little bit of trouble getting her to stand properly without the base. She's not really designed for it, and the articulation doesn't really help. It's not going to be that easy. But you should probably keep her on the base anyway, because that's typically how you'll find her in the game, I assume, if it's based on anything like the other games. So keep that. Let's look at the base real quick. It's not terrible. It's got some nice sculpt work and decent paint work. This greenish blue teal color is kind of a pearlescent metallic. The rest is mostly flat. This lighter color has a little bit of metallic Uh-oh. The lighter part has a little bit of a metal flake in it, but the rest is pretty much just flat. Has these little details over here. I'm not sure if this is supposed to be the front or the back, but due to the way the pegs are laid out, it's going to be the back if you want her centered on the base. As you can see, her feet are like that. You can't really move them too much based on the articulation. I'll talk about that in a minute. So if you want her to be centered on that little clear white disc, you're going to have to face that piece to the back. And I wasn't paying that close attention to the trailers and stuff, so I don't know if that's how it's supposed to be or not, but that's the way it is. This is translucent clear, but it's right on top of some solid gray, so I'm not sure if that should have been blue or not. I'll have to check that once the game comes out, but either way, that's the base. It is completely hollow, so I suspect some people are going to try to make it light up. I was thinking about it, but after looking at the figure a little closer, I don't think making the base light up is going to be too effective, and I'll explain that in a minute as well. Before we move on to the figure, I should note that she comes with one of these Micro Ops Master Chiefs. He's super tiny, very, very small, so the paint application, not the best. It's decent for a figure that size, and the sculpt is decent for a figure that size, but overall, it's nothing to really be impressed by. And unless you're collecting the Micro Ops line, this little bit of advertisement or promotional packaging is pretty much useless. I don't personally have any use for it. He stands almost exactly 1 inch tall above the base, so going from his feet, including the base, he's just a little over, so that's him. I said 1 inches, 1 inch. Singular. Okay, so as far as that goes, that's the real accessories. Now she does have one alternate hand for her right hand. She's got the standard hand right here, which is actually sculpted pretty well, and it's got decent paint work on it. It's not the best, but it's okay. That does match her left hand, so that's nice. But I don't think you'll ever use that, because she comes with this other hand that has this holographic panel on it that she uses to bring Master Chief out of cryo sleep in the game. And it's actually done pretty well. It's made to look kind of, they didn't want to color it too much, so it's got that like staticky look to it, which is okay. It's got a nice effect, and you can make out the details on it, like UNSC, and you can see the Chief, and a lot of the littler ones you can't really make out, but it looks like it's supposed to be something, and they did a pretty good job with it. And as you can see, it is translucent, so that's a nice touch. The only thing I really don't care for is her hand sticks through, and they glued it in that way, so there's kind of a weird thing going on there. But it's okay, it's still pretty nice, a nice detail. So I'll just leave that there for now, and let's talk about the figure. We'll do articulation first, since that's the newest improvement for Cortana based on the old figure. She's got two cut joints or swivels in her hips. They're not the same angle, and they're pretty much useless, because anytime you move them, it's going to throw the sculpt out of whack, and you can't really use them for anything, because she's got the peg holes in her feet, and she needs those to stand. So if you move her hip joints, you're not going to be able to get her stand up really, or she's going to be doing some kind of stupid pose. So there's really no point to have that. All it does is break up the sculpt, the paint, and the translucentness of the figure. I'll get to that in a minute. Next up, we have a cut joint in her abdomen area, in her diaphragm area, and it does rotate there, but again, just like the hips, it's really ugly, and it pretty much serves no purpose. From there, we have the same type of joints in the shoulders. They are somewhat more usable, just because it makes more sense to pose her arms. It doesn't really affect the pose too much. I mean, she'll still stand just fine. But again, they're really ugly. You can see the flat cut joints in there. Once you pose it, it hangs over, and it just kind of ruins the paint and the overall sculpt. She has more cut joints in her biceps, which as you can see, aren't done very well because they don't line up when you turn them, which makes sense, but if they're not going to look good, then why put them on there? I don't like that. She has a single hinge in each elbow, which is okay. It's fairly limited, and I suspect most people are just going to keep her arm back in its most fluid position based on the sculpt. So there's really no point to have those joints either. And lastly, she has wrist rotation, which is, again, it's okay because its wrist rotation doesn't really look bad too much either way, but it's overall pretty useless. So I don't see a point. She has all the same articulation on this arm, but this one is sculpted so that the most normal position is forward right about there. And of course, you can bend the elbow and rotate the wrist and bicep to get the computer screen to line up how you want it. And I would just keep it right about there. So that's about it for that. And then she does have a swivel in her head, which keeps her looking at a downward angle, which I think would probably be better if it was on a ball joint instead. But it is on a swivel, and it's probably not going to get used too much because you'll probably just have her standing there looking at the computer. So overall, I think the addition of articulation was 100% useless, and it hurt the figure because instead of having a nice translucent figure like we had before, we have lots of semi-translucent parts that don't let the light go from one to the other. If you put a light on the bottom of her feet, it stops at her hips. If you hit a light inside her torso area, it stops at that cut joint. It does that for every section. So I don't think anybody's going to be too effective with lighting up this figure through the base unless you maybe just shine it on the front, but even then it's not the best because as soon as the light gets inside, it doesn't transmit to the other sections. So the articulation does not help the figure at all. As far as paint application goes, it's pretty good. She doesn't look too translucent for the most part due to the paint. There's a lot of paint on her. Even the blue spots that look like it's just molded plastic, that's paint. And then of course these more silver spots are painted as well. And it is kind of metallic and pearly, so it looks good. She does look kind of holographic, but overall, I think they could have just done a little bit of a better job. And if you look right here, you can see a very big difference between the neck and the top of the chest or back area. And so the paint, it's not bad. It looks good overall. It's not great. It doesn't look particularly good. It's just passable, I think. Then lastly, the face and the hair. The hair is a real nice metallic color. The sculpt on the face is okay, and then the paint on the eyes kind of throws off the look a little bit. I might touch that up, but overall it's a decent paint job. Nothing really to complain about. It just could have been better. So overall, would I recommend this figure? I would, because it still makes a nice display. If you set it there, like say with Master Chief or something, it looks good and it definitely gets the job done, but I think it just could have been a little bit better. And I suspect, even though it has articulation, most people are just going to leave her posed like this. So overall, I do like the figure. I think the articulation wasn't necessary, and I think it could have been better, but it's still a pretty good figure. Definitely a necessary must-have for a Halo display or a pretty serious Halo collection, and I do recommend it. That'll do it, guys. I'm going to go ahead and get the other reviews done after this one, so keep an eye out for those, and in the meantime, keep collecting.